Welcome students, welcome to lecture number 14 where we will be beginning with module number 3, okay, under subject financial management. So your unit 3 or module 3 is nothing but it is sources of financing and cost of capital. Now this particular module is having two parts, that is sources of financing, which is a complete theory module, a theory part in this particular module, and cost of capital, which is a theory, combination of theory and problems. Okay, so what we will be seeing in this particular module is what are the different sources of finance, that is shares, debentures, term loans, lease financing, hybrid financing, venture capital, angel investing, private equity, warrants and convertibles. So this particular part on the left hand side is complete theory. Then we are going to see cost of capital. Now, what is the cost associated to raise the capital, okay, or to raise the finance? That is a combination of theory as well as problems. So first we will be going through the basic concepts. Then what is the cost of debenture capital? Suppose if you're raising finance with the help of issuing debentures, what is the cost associated with that? Then the cost of preferential capital, same. If we are issuing or raising finance with the help of issuing the preference shares, what is the cost associated to that? Then cost of term loans, cost of equity capital, cost of retained earnings, determination of WACC, which is nothing but weighted average cost of capital, which is also called as WACC, and marginal cost of capital. And in this particular module, you will be having case study on weighted average cost of capital. So in every module, you will be having a similar set of uh, problems on which you will be having case study. So as we have seen in time value of money, you will be having case study on loan amortization. Similarly, under this particular module, you will be having case study on weighted average cost of capital. Now, let us see what we will be covering today. So today we will be covering what are the different sources of financing. So first of all, let us understand what is the meaning of sources of financing. So sources of financing means the source through which a company can raise finance in order to meet its needs. See students, every company or every unit requires finance. Without finance, we have already seen in module number 1, without finance, the company cannot run. So the company may not have sufficient funds. Okay, so it has to search to certain sources through which it can get finance. Now, why is this finance needed by any company or organization is to meet its needs. Now, the needs of a company is divided into 3 types. It can be to meet the short-term needs, to meet the medium-term needs, and to meet the long-term needs. So just remember, sources of finance is nothing but a source or a means through which a company can receive the finance, get the finance, and company wants the finance to meet its needs. Needs of a company is divided into short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Now, the different types of finance that is required is can either be a company may want a short-term finance. Now, short-term finance is if it wants only for a period of 1 year or less than 1 year. If the amount of the finance required by the company is for a period of 1 year or less than 1 year, then it is termed as short-term finance and the need of the company is a short-term need. Now, why will a company need this short-term finance is to meet its working capital requirements. Now, what is the meaning of working capital? The capital is nothing but finance, investment. So the finance required by the company for the day-to-day working of the operations of the company is nothing but working capital. So if any company requires finance, which is for a period of less than 1 year, okay, it requires to meet its working capital. Now, working capital is nothing but capital required for the day-to-day working of the organization. Okay, for example, we can see meeting the daily expenses, purchases of raw material. Now, in a company, suppose if it is into a manufacturing company, purchasing of raw material is a daily task or it is a monthly task, correct? So finance is required to meet those particular expenses. So that is termed as short-term finance. Next, when we say medium-term finance, if any company needs or requires the finance for more than 1 year but less than 5 years, if the need of finance is there within the company, it is termed as a medium term finance. Usually, it is to purchase the assets like purchase of plant and machinery. Okay, and then long term finance, when the need is for more than 5 years, okay, then the finance is termed as a long term finance. Okay, the need is termed as a long term need, and majorly it is for the purchase of the fixed assets and making investments. So usually it is for the land purchase of land and building, or furniture and fixtures. So usually medium term and long term will depend upon the type of asset that you're purchasing, and how frequent or in what intervals are you going to make the replacement of those assets. So we have seen what is the meaning of source of finance. Source of finance is the means through which the finance can be procured, okay, to meet the needs of the company. The needs of the company is divided into short term, medium term, and long term. Okay. Now we have understood what is finance, what are the sources of finance and types of the financial needs. Now let us understand what are the different ways available with the company in order to get the finance or raise the finance. So following are the sources of finance. These all are the means through which the finance can be procured by a company. So if any company wants finance, it can get the finance with the help of these particular sources. So first is shares, second is debentures, third term loans, fourth lease financing, fifth hybrid financing, sixth venture capital, seventh angel investing, eight is private equity, nine is warrant and convertibles. Some of these sources of finance we have already covered in module number 1, but just let us go through it. So first let us understand how can a company raise a finance with the help of issuing shares. So first let us understand what is share. So a share is an indivisible unit of capital expressing the ownership relationship between the company and the shareholders. The denominated value of a share is its face value, and the total of the face value of issued share represents the capital of the company. The income received from the ownership of shares is the dividend. Types of shares that a company can issue is equity shares or preference shares. So in short, what does this slide means that any company who wants to raise its capital or who wants finance can procure finance by issuing a share. Now when it is issuing shares to the public, okay, and when the public subscribes for that share, that public becomes the shareholder of the company. So the share, suppose if I am holding share of an XYZ company, that means I have a particular unit in the capital of the company. That means I am I am having the ownership in the company in proportion to the shares that I hold in the company. So depends on number of shares that I'm holding in the company, that shows the ownership right that I have in the company. So a share is nothing but a part of the share capital. That is a part of the capital that is raised by the company. One unit of that is a share. Okay. Now, every share will be having the face value, okay, on which it is being issued, and the number of shares that I'm holding. Suppose if I'm holding 10 shares of XYZ company and the face value is 10. So what is the total capital that I'm holding in that company? 10 into 10. Okay. So that is the total capital that I'm holding into the company. Now, once I have given the finance to the company, okay, and they have issued me shares, I need to get some income from the company. Since my shares are invested in that company, I am having money in that company, so the company gives me dividend. So dividend is nothing but the income that I'm getting on the shares that I'm holding in a particular company. So the income received from the ownership of shares is a dividend, because no person will invest in any particular financial instrument without a motive of getting something in return. So even when you're investing in debentures, even if you're investing in bank, even if you're investing in shares, you will always invest with the motive of earning profit or earning something in return. So when you're investing in shares, or when you're uh, you know putting your money in shares, you will always put to get something in return, and that return on shares is nothing but dividend. Now, there are two types of shares that can be issued by the company. One is the equity shares, other is the preference shares. So let us see what is the difference between the two. As already explained in module number 1, but still continuing, equity shares, they are the ordinary shares of the company. See, suppose when they say that XYZ company has issued ordinary shares, means you have to understand it is equity shares. So equity shares is nothing but one nomenclature given to the ordinary shares. Okay, and what does equity share represent? They form part of ownership of the shareholders of a company. So suppose if you all are holding equity shares of a company, of any company, that means you all are the owners of that company. Okay, so whenever you are holding an equity share in any company, it means you all are representing the ownership in that particular company. But that is not in case of preference shares. These shares have preferential right over payment of dividend and repayment of capital. See, preference shares, when you're holding preference shares of the company, that doesn't mean you are the owners of the company. Okay, since you cannot participate in the decisions that is made by the company. But whereas if you're holding equity shares, you can participate in the decisions that are to be made in the company. But in case of preference shares, you will have only two preferential right over equity shareholders. That is one, payment of dividend. Dividend is nothing but a return given on the share amount of shares that has been invested. Now, in case of payment of dividend, first the company will always pay to the preference shareholders, and if profit remains, then the equity shareholders get the right to payment of dividend. Okay, so in case of payment of dividend, the first priority that is given by the company is to the preference shareholders. That is why they are called preference shares, because they have preferential right over the equity in respect of payment of dividend. And second is repayment of capital. Suppose the company is winding up, or suppose the company is liquidating. So what happens? Whatever capital has been invested in the form of shares by the shareholders, okay, that has to be repaid back. Correct. So when the company is winding up or is into liquidation, first the preference shareholders capital will be repaid, and if anything is remaining, then the equity shareholders will get. So always how it works is, in respect of dividend payment and in case of repayment of capital, always preference shareholders will be getting the first priority, and if profit remains or if capital is there, then only the equity shareholders will get it back. So this is the basic difference between equity shares and preference shares. Next, rate of dividend. I told you, in on shares, the return that the shareholders will be getting is the dividend. So in case of equity shares, the dividend is not fixed. Suppose this year they can get 10% dividend, okay, on the number of shares that they are holding in a particular company. In next year, if the profits are very good of that company, they can get 15% dividend. So the rate of dividend is not fixed. But in case of preference shares, what happens is, when the company issues the preference shares, like it wants the finance and it is issuing preference shares to the public, and the public, whoever is subscribing for those shares, becomes the preference shareholders. When they are issuing the preference shares, the rate of dividend is fixed. They tell that the preference shareholders will be getting a dividend of 10%, no matter what is the amount of profit earned by the company. So suppose in a particular year, the profit made by the company is very less. Still, 10% of dividend has to be paid to the preference shareholders. Suppose the next year the company is making very huge profits. Still, only they will get 10% of dividend, since it is fixed. Next, dividend. It is paid after all liabilities are paid out. So we know that the dividend is paid out of profits. Okay. Now, first, when profits are being earned by the company, first from that, okay, how is profit derived? After eliminating or minusing or deducting all the expenses. So equity shareholders always gets the last preference. So first, what happens in a company? If debenture holders are there, they will be first paid the interest. If the company has taken a bank loan, then first the bank loan interest will be paid. Then if the company has preference shareholders, first the preference shareholders will be paid, and last, if anything remains, then the equity shareholders will be paid off. So even dividend will be paid off only after all other parties, like the third parties, the preference shareholders, only once after they are paid off, then only the equity shareholders will get the payment. In case of preference shares, is paid in prior to equity shareholders. So that I've already told. Before making payment to equity shareholders, the preference shareholders will be paid. Voting rights. Yes, they have a voting rights. Suppose if any decision has to be taken in the company, so all equity shareholders are given the particular proposal that this particular decision has to be taken. There will be voting. Based on the voting, maximum votes, the decision will be taken either in favor or against it. So all the equity shareholders have voting rights. That means they can participate in taking the decisions of the company. Whereas preference shareholders, they do not have voting rights, means they cannot take the decisions of the company. Next, capital repayment in case of winding up. Equity shares are repaid at the end. As I told you, when the company is winding up, okay, first the preference shareholders are paid, first the outsiders are paid, okay, outside liabilities are paid, then the preference shareholders are paid, and if anything is remaining at the end, then the equity shareholders are paid. So always equity shareholders are at the end. Next, preference shares are repaid over equity shares. Next, convertibility cannot be converted, can be converted into equity shares. So suppose if once you are an equity shareholders, you cannot convert yourself into preference shareholders. But if you are a preference shareholder, you can convert your share that you're holding. Preference shares you will be holding, you can convert it into equity shares. That is allowed. So this is the basic difference of equity shares and preference shares that are issued by the company in order to raise finance. Is this understood by everyone? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now you all tell me what is the benefit of like we have seen that the pros and cons of an equity share and preference share, and we have understood the difference. Can anyone tell which is more riskier, investing in equity shares or investing in preference shares?
Preference equity shares.
Okay, but still there are so many shareholders who invest in equity shares. What is the reason for that?
If a company earn more profit, they will get more return, ma'am, more dividend.
Very good. See, as we know that there is a direct relationship between risk and profits. So if the more riskier it is, the maximum returns also will be available in case of equity shares. So we are just saying that if it is there is a downfall, but what if the company is earning good profits? So in that case, as that student rightly said, that since profits can shoot up, if the dividend or the earnings available to equity shareholders also can shoot up, but that is not in case of preference or debentures, because they will be having fixed irrespective of the profit made by the company. So equity shares being riskier, okay, is having the possibility of carrying maximum returns. Next is debentures. So, what are debentures? A debenture is a medium to long term loan taken by a large company to borrow money. Therefore, it is a debt instrument. See, in short, when a company is taking a loan from the bank, okay, it is termed as a bank loan or term loan taken from bank. But when a company is taking a loan from the public, it is nothing but debenture. Now when the company is in need of money, okay, So it is having one particular source called as debentures through which it can raise the money. Now what will happen here? Suppose if the company doesn't want shareholders, okay, so it will opt for borrowing money from the public. So it will borrow money from the public. In return, it will issue debentures to the public, okay. And when the public is lending money to a particular company, it will have an intention to get something in return. So that something is nothing but interest, debenture interest that is given by the company to the public for the amount that is being lended by the public to the company. So what is happening? In short, debenture is nothing but the loan given by the public to the companies, okay. And in return, the company will issue debentures to the public. So the when the public subscribes for the debentures, it is called the particular a person who is subscribing for the debenture is called as a debenture holder of the company. So the persons holding debentures are called the debenture holders, and every debenture holders are entitled to interest, because no person will invest or will give money or lend money without an intention of getting something in return. So what is the return here? It is the interest. Return in case of shares is dividend, and return in case of debentures is interest. Debenture holders do not have the voting rights in the company. Only equity shareholders have the voting rights. Debenture holders are like lenders of the company, so they do not have any right to participate in the decisions to be made in the company. There are different types of debentures. They can be redeemable debentures. Now, what do you mean by redeemable? Redeemable is repayable. See, a company can issue how, for example, when we take a loan from bank, we can take a 5-year loan, we can take a 20-year loan, which means that we have to repay the loan amount within 20 years or 5 years. Similarly, when the company is issuing debentures, and if it is issuing redeemable debentures, which means the amount has to be repaid by the company to the public within the specified period of time. So suppose if it is a redeemable debentures of 5 years, what does that mean? Today in the 0 year, the company has taken money from the debenture holders. Redeemable after 5 years, that means after 5 years the company has to repay the loan amount whatever it is borrowed from the public. When there is a repayment, redeemable is nothing but repayment. So whenever there is a repayment, then it is called as redeemable debentures. Irredeemable debentures means there is no repayment in such case. So irredeemable means they are not redeemable by the company back to the share debenture holders. Next is convertible. When I say convertible debentures means debentures can be converted into shares. So suppose if a company, XYZ company, is issuing convertible debentures. So what does that mean? That particular debenture holder at his wish and will can convert his debentures into shares. The option will be available. When suppose if a company is issuing non-convertible debentures, so it means that once a debenture holder will always remain a debenture holder. He cannot, if he's having if he is possessing with him a non-convertible debenture, that means he doesn't have an option to convert his debentures into shares in future. So this is all about debentures and how a company can raise its finance with the help of debentures. Is this clear? Yes, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, next. Term loans. So one more source of finance or one more means of finance through which the company can procure the finance is term loans. Now term loan is nothing but a loan from bank for a specific amount that has a specified repayment schedule, either carrying a fixed or floating rate of interest. A term loan is suitable for an established business with sound financial statements. First of all, student, if any company wants a loan from bank, when it approaches the bank will not upfront give the loan amount to the particular businessman or to the particular company. First, it will ask for its financial statement just to see what is the financial position of the company, whether the company can repay the loan back. So once it finds that the company has a good financial position, sound financial position, then the bank will approve the loan, okay, for a specified amount, like whatever amount is required by the company. And we have seen that once a loan is taken from the bank, what is the loan amortization schedule? We have already seen that the company needs to repay it, okay, according to that particular schedule with the like annual installment, which consists of principal and interest. Now, the rate of interest, sometimes the bank can keep a fixed rate of interest. Suppose the interest on the bank loan is suppose 10%. It can keep it fixed, or it can be fluctuating as well. Fluctuating means depending upon the market condition. Suppose tomorrow there is inflation, so the rate of interest can increase to 12%. Otherwise, if as and when as the government is changing the rates accordingly, the rate of interest can also be floating in terms of bank loan. So this is one more means of finance, or one more source of finance through which the company can raise the finance. Next is lease financing. This is also one more source through which the company can raise the finance, okay. So lease financing is one of the important sources of medium and long term financing. The owner of an asset gives another person the right to use the asset against periodical payments. The owner of the asset is known as a lessor and the user is known as lessee. The periodical payment made by the lessee to the lessor is known as lease rentals. Under lease financing, lessee is given the right to use the asset, but the ownership lies with the lessor, and at the end of the lease contract, the asset is returned to the lessor, or an option is given to the lessee either to purchase the asset or to renew the lease agreement. So, what is happening entirely in this lease financing? Let me just tell you. Okay, can you all see this particular picture? Okay, so let me explain in this. The lessor is a person who will be having any particular asset. Okay, so what the lessee will do, the lessee is in need of suppose a particular furniture or in a particular vehicle in order to transport goods. So why it will think that why do I need to invest money in buying that particular truck, okay, to transport the vehicles? Better I take it on lease. So the lessee will approach the lessor that since you have a asset, can you give me on lease? So what the lessor will do, he will give this asset for use on rental basis. In more simple language, if I tell, lessor will give this asset which belongs to the lessor to the lessee only for use, because lessee wants to use. Now free of cost will not be, he will not be giving it free of cost. So the lessor will charge lease rentals, that is every month or every quarter or half yearly or yearly, the lessee has to pay the lessor certain amount as rental for using this particular asset, okay. And all these terms and conditions will be agreed in the form of lease agreement. First, a lease agreement is prepared. Now, suppose if the lease is taken for 10 years, suppose this entire process goes on for 10 years. After 10 years, okay, an option is given to the lessee. Either the lessee can return this asset back to the lessor, or either it can purchase this particular asset, the lessee can purchase this asset from the lessor, or they can renew the lease agreement. So this is the entire process of lease financing, where finance is being, here the lessee, instead of making a heavy investment, he can use any asset by taking it on lease and just paying lease rentals. This is one of the sources of lease financing. Did everyone understand this concept of lease financing?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let us move ahead. What is hybrid financing? See, hybrid financing instruments are those sources of finance which possesses characteristics of both equity as well as debt. Now, hybrid financing instruments are preference shares, convertible debentures, warrants, options, etc. Like debt has fixed interest rate, preference shares have fixed dividend, and they also have preference of payment at the time of liquidation, just as debt holders get. They do not have any say in the management in the form of voting rights also do not have any share in the residual profit also. So students, hybrid financing are certain. No, let me explain this in short. Hybrid financing, when the word hybrid is used, means there is a combination of both debt as well as equity. Now you know what is equity, you know what is debt. Now when I say it is a when I say it is a preference shares. Now preference shares has both the combination of an equity as well as debt. Now how it has a combination of equity? Because dividend has been received by the preference shareholders. And when I say debt, means they will be repaid their capital at the time of winding up. So they have both the characteristics of debt as well as equity. Next, even convertible debentures. When I say convertible debentures, means they can be easily converted into shares. So they also are having the combination of characteristics of both debt and equity. So you know one thing, students, that debt and equity both are going to get the fixed interest rate. That means when I say debentures, they'll be getting the fixed interest rate. When I say preferential, they'll be getting the fixed rate of dividend. Okay. And even in case of winding up, first the debenture holders are paid off, their amount is being paid off, and then the preference shares are paid off, their capital are being paid off. Okay, so hybrid financing means they are having a combination of both debt as well as equity. Regarding warrants, we will be seeing in the succeeding slides in detail. So is this clear, students? What is hybrid financing? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, next. Now, what is the meaning of venture capital? Okay, venture capital is a money invested in businesses that are emerging, exist only as an initiative or startups or small businesses. So students, many times what happens, many times when new business has been set up, okay, when startups are being registered, so they are in the need of capital. And many times what happens, people are usually scared to invest in startups. Why? Because they may work or they may not work. So what happens? Suppose when some startup is being registered, okay, they want some capital. Okay, there is a group of people who would like to invest in such company, and they are called as venture capitalists. They will invest only if they know that the company has huge potential to grow. So just remember, venture capital is when any new venture or any when new startup is being registered or is being emerging. Okay, the capital is invested by the venture capitalist only when those companies are having potential to grow. Okay, so let me read this. Venture capital is the money invested in businesses that are emerging, exist only as an initiative or startups or small business. These companies have huge potential to grow. The people who invest this money are called as venture capitalists. The venture capital investment is made when the venture capitalist buys the shares of such company and becomes a financial partner in the business. So obviously when you purchase the shares of company, you have the right in the decisions of the company, you become the owner of the company. So similarly, when venture capitalists will invest in such startups, okay, they invest by suppose buying the shares or purchasing shares of such startup company, they have a right in the financial and they become a financial partner in that particular company. Now, venture capital typically comes from institutional investors and high net worth individual and is pooled together by dedicated investment firms. So, like venture capital firms comprise a group of professional investors. See, only persons who are having high net worth, I mean to say, only those individuals whose business are is good in the market, they have goodwill in the market, and who has excess of financial and goods financial position in the company, only they can invest in venture capital. Reason being, if some company is not financially doing good and they invest in this venture capital, what happens? If the startups fails, their business also will fail. But if high net worth individual, if they invest in small startups, okay, even if that startups don't do that good, okay, still they will be having financial stability. Okay, so venture capitalist who invest usually in venture capital in the form of venture capital is only those investors who are having high net worth. Only they can invest in venture capitalists because it is an investment in a startups and we are not certain whether the business will do good or no. So is this clear? Yes.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
like I say,
Yes,
in
ma'am.
institutional investors, they can either be banks can invest, or they can either be insurance companies who can invest, mutual funds, okay, companies that can invest in this startups. Next, angel investing. So angel investors, sometimes known as business angels, are individuals who invest their personal finances in a startup. Okay. Now, angels are rich, often influential individuals who choose to invest in high potential companies in exchange for an equity stake. As they are investing their money and there is always an inherent risk, it's highly unlikely that an angel will invest in a business owner who isn't willing to give away a part of their company. So angel investing, what happens? It is similar to venture capital. Okay, here again in startups, the money is invested by an individual. Okay, who's again having a good finance position. And when they are investing, they are only investing with an intention to get an equity stake in the company. Okay, now since the startups is always riskier, we never know that the startup business will either shoot or either it will fall down. So that is why there is always a risk attached in the uh, startup businesses. So you can see this diagram. So suppose if this person is starting a business, this is an angel is nothing but an individual who's going to financially help this company in order to grow and carry out its operations. Okay, only provided this company gives a equity stake to that angel. Why it is called angel investing? Because if someone is helping you, you always term that particular individual as angel. So in case of small startups, when some finance has been provided by any particular individual, so that individual is termed as finance to that particular startup. So it is called angel investing. Is this clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next, what is a private equity? So private equity again is nothing but, students, they are again and investment funds, that they are again nothing but the sources of finance, okay, that buy the shares of the company, okay, or reconstruct those companies who are not publicly traded. Okay, now it is an equity that is shares representing ownership of or an interest in an entity that is not publicly listed or traded. So a private equity investment will generally be made by a private equity firm or a venture capital firm or an angel investor. Now, each of these categories of investors has its own set of goals, preference, and investment strategy. All investors provide working capital to target company for its expansion, innovation of product development, or restructuring of company's operations, ownership, or management. So typically, what is this is private equity is nothing but a type of equity, okay, consisting of equity securities, okay, in those companies which are not publicly traded, in order to just reconstruct those companies in order to perform better and make their operations better. Okay, private equity. So there are different private equity firms, venture capital firms, in angel investors firm. So in same lines, private equity also works. So typically, a private equity investment will generally be made by a private equity firms. So in market, there are different private equity firms who will make this private equity investment. Okay, in those companies who are not publicly traded, and the only intention is to restructure the company's operations, ownership, and management for its better working. Now, when I say they're not publicly listed or traded, means their stocks are not listed on BSE or NSE. Is this clear, students?
Yes, ma'am.
No. Next, last part we have is warrants and convertibles. They are securities offered by the company to attract investors and raise finance. Okay, so warrants are nothing but, students, they are long-term securities. Okay, they grant investors the right to purchase shares at a fixed price. So this is again nothing like but working as a derivative. Okay, they are giving an option to the investors, okay, to purchase the shares at a fixed price. Now, the price at which the underlying security can be bought or sold is referred to an exercise price or strike price. Now, suppose if they want to purchase a particular asset, they are given a right. Suppose if they want to purchase a particular asset for, suppose you say, rupees 1 lakh, so that 1 lakh is being fixed, so that particular price is called as exercise price or strike price. Now, warrants that gives the right to buy a security are known as call warrants, and those that give the right to sell a security are known as put warrants. So suppose if I hold a call warrant, that means it is giving me an option to buy a security at the underlying price. But suppose if I'm holding a put warrant, that means I have only the right to sell the security at the underlying price. So this is nothing but, again, it will work in the form of derivatives. Is this clear? Yes, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Next is
Yes,
convertibles.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So, convertibles are long-term securities which can be changed into another type of security such as common stock. By purchasing a convertible bond, the investor can still receive returns as if it were a traditional bond. Has an additional option of converting that bond into shares if the share price increases enough to make it worthwhile. So again, convertibles are bonds are nothing but works in similar lines to debentures. Okay, like you have even government bonds where government issues bonds against certain amount. So what happens here? When someone is issuing convertibles, means again those are nothing but bonds, and bonds are similar to debentures. So when you purchase a convertible bond, that means whenever you're investing in a bond or purchasing a bond, obviously in return of some amount, that is nothing but the interest on the bonds. Now these bonds will be no longer bonds for a long term. You will be having an option of converting these bonds into debentures, converting these bonds into shares. So depending on your uh, you know depending upon your prediction of the share price, you can convert your bonds into debentures. So convertibles are nothing but securities that can get converted from one form to another form. The options are given under convertibles if you purchase convertible bonds. Is this clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. So today we have seen what are the different sources of finance. Okay, what is the meaning of source of finance, and why does a company require finance? And this particular part, that sources of finance, is only a theory part. Till here it is only theory in this particular module. Next is the cost associated to raise the finance, which is a combination of theory as well as problems, which we will be seeing in our succeeding lectures. So thank you so much, students. We are done for the session for today. Thank you.